Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to our second strategic webinar of the year in the EUROCONTROL Stakeholder Forum. We've got the video going. My name is Philip Hughes and I'm the head of stakeholder management here at EUROCONTROL, and I have the pleasure today to moderate this session on the topic of common unit rate in air en route navigation charges. So today we're looking at en route air navigation service provision, the cost of which you will all know varies very substantially across many different states. And we will discuss the topic of whether adopting a common unit rate for en route charges would result in flying more direct routes and help Europe achieve its challenging environmental targets. You will have seen this floated already in the Wise Persons Group and the SES2 Plus proposals. So this is obviously a very topical issue. Now, Eurocontrol collects route charges on behalf of its member states through the Central Route Charges Office, or CRCO. The CRCO runs a very effective and centralized system which ensures that the charges which are essential to the funding of the European Air Traffic Management System are recovered. Charging is based on a formula which takes into account the weight of the aircraft, the length of the flight, and the national unit rate, which is based on the cost of actually providing the service. So the route charges billed by Eurocontrol to airlines represent roughly about 8 billion per year in the period 2016 to 2019. Obviously, during COVID, it fell. The last year, it was about 7.6 billion. This year, we expect it to be nudging towards 10. So it's quite a substantial amount of money. So together with our guest panelists, we'll be discussing whether a common unit rate would really incentivize aircraft users to fly more efficient routes and to assess the practicality of adapting the current route charges system, as well as exploring the implications that such a change would have for air navigation service providers and airlines. Now, last September, Eurocontrol issued a paper, think paper on this topic, which concluded that removing the economic incentive to airlines to fly longer routes because of differences in unit rates potentially could have an environmental effect of about 4,400 tons of CO2 on a busy day, and roughly about remove 1.6% of flight inefficiency from the system. So the think paper also shows how common unit rates would be technically feasible. So the current billing system managed by CRCO would need to be adapted, as it has several times before, to apply the new common rate, as well as introducing a reattribution mechanism to guarantee revenue neutrality for participating states, who otherwise would be receiving anything between 230 million more or 154 million less, where their national unit rate and the common unit rate differ. And there's a table in the paper which explains this. So finally, in the paper, we quantify the financial impact on airspace users, and we find, and this is at the airline end, so we find the airlines mostly flying European core area would benefit from lower charges to the tune of about 70 million, whereas airlines operating to and from European regions or outside the core area would face higher route charges of approximately 30 million, highlighting the need for careful management of the change. And again, in the paper, At the very back, you will see a table of the potential winners and losers. So that's the background. So to discuss this topic, we've lined up some top players in the industry representing ANSPs and airlines who would be on the sharp end. And I'm delighted to introduce to you Elena Vega Fernandez, Assistant Director, ATM Infrastructure Europe at IATA, Valerie Hackel, Managing Director in EUROCONTROL, and Nicole Lear, Chief Financial Officer at Skyguide. So each panelist will make a short introduction to share their perspective on the topic, and then I will open the floor to a question and answer session for which we interestingly have received a very large number of questions, and you can use the Q&A function in your QS to send questions. So please feel free to do so. And if you're experiencing any technical issues, please use the chat function. So without any further ado, I'd like to give the floor to our first speaker, Elena Vega Fernandez, to say a few words from the IATA perspective. Elena.
Thank you very much, Philip, and good afternoon, everybody in Europe. My name, as Philip has introduced, is Elena Vega. I am Assistant Director of ATM Infrastructure in IATA Europe. I thank you very much for your invitation to this panel about this controversial topic of the common unit rate. From our perspective in IATA, we are very skeptical with respect to this concept because we truly believe that the impact will be fundamentally economic, and it will have not really a great effect in terms of environment. We believe that in terms of cost, the impact can be significantly negative for many airlines. So yeah, we are very doubtful whether this could be a good idea. From the environmental perspective, we regret that all the focus is always put on the airlines, like if it were our only responsibility, all the inefficiencies that there exist still in the European airspace. So we take all the blame, and we don't agree with this image that it is given in some forums, and even a little bit in your own paper, like if we were not flying directly just for fun. I mean, we fly as efficiently as we can, and I don't want to blame other stakeholders, but we are even trying to compensate other inefficiencies that we all know as aviation partners that there exist in the system. Actually, 2019, which is the reference year in your paper, is a good example of a lot of deviations being promoted even by the network manager just to try to compensate the lack of capacity. And we all know that we are facing different kind of crises every year. Last year, we probably were deviating because of the unexpected effects of a war in Europe, which is just blocking a good part of the airspace. So it is not that airlines don't fly more direct routes just for fun. It's sometimes that the airspace is not even available for different and wide number of reasons. Also, I want to point out that some recent studies even recognize that the most direct route is not necessarily the most optimal route in terms of fuel consumption, because there are other factors that also need to be taken into consideration. Among them, meteorological events, strong winds, or flight levels that are accessible at any moment. So, just to stress that less fuel consumption and emissions is already a priority for airlines. We, as I say, fly as efficiently as we can, considering all the restriction. We truly doubt that this common unit rate could be of any effect in terms of behavior, because some airspace will be less expensive, but other airspaces will become more expensive. So quite probably we are just shifting the problem from here to there. But if it comes to behavior, the airspaces that are going to become more expensive and therefore less competitive with respect to their neighbors, because there is always a neighbor, could also suffer from this decision of potentially avoid this airspace if you truly believe that it is the only thing that drives our behavior. But just for you to also be aware, with the current fuel prices, we are more motivated than ever to fly shorter. I mean, it is in our own interest to fly shorter, and in our minimization of our cost functions, fuel has a lot more weight than other factors, usually. Anyhow, as I was saying before, we are blamed for making decisions that are just trying to make our business feasible and not only profitable, this as well, obviously, because we are business, but we should not be criticized so much for trying to do everything within a high number of constraints. I want to touch upon the economic part very briefly, because we believe the true impact of this initiative will be economical, with a very uneven impact for airlines and also for states that we cannot support. I think it breaks several ICAO principles, such as the cost relatedness principle at the state level, and also some principles according to which some users should not be bearing the cost related to some measures benefiting other users that are actually their competitors. So it is very difficult for us to support this kind of approach. Revenue neutrality, however, and I also want to stress this, is not a principle that we support in any way, because the performance scheme or the charging scheme or the charging system has never been there to guarantee any level of expected revenue. I mean, we pay for our services, but it is no kind of recognized principle that we have to ensure someone's expected revenue. What could be the negative effects in terms of cost? We believe that this common unit rate will also potentially neutralize single European sky achievements in the area of cost efficiency in the last 20 years, because it could potentially penalize best performers in favor of the worst ones. The average is not necessarily a good indication of neutrality of any sort, and it could still be suboptimal. And in our opinion, this will derive in no incentive to improve, and quite potentially it will derive in the cheapest airspaces right now to just go away from cost containment policies, just increase their prices. The system could become less transparent than it is today in terms of what's the right price for the right services at every single airspace. I will offer an alternative. I mean, if someone believes that there are some behavioral things that could be improved with lower prices, the current regulatory system already provides with a mechanism to reduce the prices in the expensive airspaces without affecting the cheapest ones. It is called price cap, or within the current regulation, Article 29.6. This is available for every state who is concerned about their airspaces not being overflown and this having a negative environmental effect. This will still be promoting a market-like behavior, in our opinion, and it will avoid all the negative effects that could be derived from this initiative. We are not big fans of this proposal. In summary, we believe this measure will increase complexity, be unfair for many actors, will have no true impact in this behavior you are trying to correct, because it will be just displacing the problem somewhere else. And it will not remove part of the problems that cause deviation from the direct route or from the optimal route nowadays, because it will have a virtual no effect in the current inefficiencies of the system.
Okay, thanks, Elena. That's very comprehensive. Valerie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Philip. Warm welcome, and thank you for having me. Let me start with underscoring the importance of the initiative. It is imperative that we find ways to reduce the CO2 footprint of aviation. Since we're in the middle of a phase of exploration and learning, please regard my contribution today as inputs to a hopefully lively and enriching discussion.
Yep.
So I would like to make a clear commitment to climate action and CO2 reduction. For sure, climate action is hugely important and has become a life and death issue for our industry. ANSPs must do their bit. Studies put our contribution at about up to 10% of total CO2 emissions. This is something, and we clearly have to deliver. And please allow me to refer to EUROCONTROL as a pioneer in climate protection. We were one of the first free route airspaces in the EU in 2012, and we were able to expand it to the first 24/7 cross-border free route airspace in 2016 together with our partners. It saves more than 30,000 tons of CO2 emissions per year in Austria alone. To put into perspective the facts, there are numerous studies, as we know. The figures vary, but they are in the order of magnitude, where reports indicate that the European aviation industry emits around, let's say, 200 million tons of CO2. And of these, approximately 80% stem from en route traffic. So a pricing concept, such as a common unit rate, targets those traffic flows producing the highest share of CO2 emissions. The question remains, what level of CO2 reduction can be leveraged by a common unit rate, and does it really target the challenge? So the answer to this is more complicated, I believe. It may be of interest to you to know that in our functional airspace block FAB-CE, we looked into the issue already in 2018. I have to say that we hardly found any evidence that a common unit rate will have real measurable effects on routings. Interestingly, we found that only less than 15% of flights on longer than necessary routes were cheaper in terms of charges than the shortest routes. 60% were even higher on route charges than the shortest routes. So most longer routes were chosen for other reasons like weather conditions or capacity, as we heard from Elena as well. So looking at the EUROCONTROL study, let me postulate a rather skeptical proposition along three arguments. First is the size of impact. The calculation model confirms a positive environmental impact, but it is slight. We heard 1.6% reduction of CO2 seems possible. Admittedly, this is something, but it looks as though EUROCONTROL's white paper supports the FAB-CE assessment that there is no guarantee that a single unit rate produces the desired environmental results. The results could easily be within the confidence interval of the models that were applied. So possibly a common unit rate would have no effect on the climate. Second, the economic implications, as we heard already, need to be correctly weighed. As we know, a common unit rate would have a major impact on the revenue of airspace users, for sure, and some ANSPs as well. On the ANSP side, income neutrality is set as a minimum demand. Even if this requirement was met, cost management would become more complex, given the need for an additional clearing layer. Also, while today the cost situation of an ANSP has a direct and visible effect on the unit rate, this effect would be much weaker. So less transparency and its consequence is another concern. Third and last, I would like to stress the implications on capacity, as we have heard already as well. A single unit rate would mean that the rate was cut precisely where capacity shortages are at the moment. This probably leads to delays and airlines switch to longer routes as a consequence. The long-term consequence also could be substantial shifts in traffic flows across Europe, with capacity shortages in already overloaded airspace and significant overcapacity in other areas. This would require a systematic increase and scale back of capacity, which would be very costly overall. And it is unclear if it was feasible at all. So we must ask whether it would be not possible to put this money to better use in the interest of environmental protection. So I would like to draw some preliminary conclusions. I believe it is important not to view the pricing question in isolation. It must be part of an overall package of measures affecting pricing, capacity management, and the environment. We heard that focusing on great circle routes falls short of effective CO2 reduction. The overall flight profile, altitudes, wind conditions, etc. are important too, and therefore pricing should not merely incentivize the shortest routes. Also, I would not like to see an existing rigid pricing system be removed by a new rigid mechanism, especially if strong evidence of positive impact is missing. In the digital age, it must be possible to attune prices to a variety of parameters relevant for climate protection, such as, again, capacity or type of aircraft, wind conditions. And short-term, term, and even real-time pricing adjustments could achieve a great deal. At present, we are not technologically equipped, but such modulation of the charges at national level is possible in theory. And to make progress, we will need a holistic dynamic pricing concept and work with smart incentive schemes. So please let me finish by stressing that we as ANSPs support anything that helps us hit our targets. And this is why discussing a single unit rate is so important. Also, we as ANSPs remain committed to SES, a harmonized European airspace. And of course, we are dedicated to contribute to a green aviation with all our energy and efforts, no matter what. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Valerie. That was very good. Nicole, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon for having me in this panel today. First, as a disclaimer, I would like to say that today what I'm going to say is a state of thinking in SkyGuide that I will now give you. Of course, as Valerie said, we are in an exploration phase, so this is work in progress. And I also would like to concur and stress that in order to ensure a sustainable aviation, it's really important that we tackle environmental problems and issues, and decreasing the carbon footprint of aviation is not an option. It's absolutely mandatory. And I would like to build on what Elena said, that sometimes we let it to airline, and that's exactly what we are not doing now in this discussion, not to let it only to airlines, but also that ANSP can contribute to this decrease in the carbon footprint. And one of the major levers that we have as ANSP is to incentivize direct routes or environmental friendly routes. So I think let's help our customer, let's help the airline, and bring our piece to these environmental issues that we have to tackle together. The second thing I would like to stress is that for us as SkyGuide, a status quo is not an option. The current remuneration schemes has proved its limit today. First, when it comes to tackling environmental issues. And second, also when it comes to promoting the implementation of a single European sky. For long now, we have been speaking about a single European sky, but we see that at the moment, the implementation phase is quite slow. And we think that the current remuneration scheme does not help at all. And that then we need to move. We need to move forward. We need to modernize. For example, today, ANSP are still incentivized to build up assets because we are part of our remuneration is linked to the value of our assets, while we all know that we have to move to more buying more services. Then the third question, the third point would be, is then a common unit rate the right answer to these different challenges? First, environment, of course, but also transforming ANSP, being more centric, network-centric, and more efficient. And I'm always very surprised to see that we immediately throw the baby with the bathwater. And whenever a proposal comes, we are very, very good at pushing it back, and which for me means going back to status quo. So I think that I would not throw the baby with the bathwater. Of course, Of course, a common unit rate comes with challenges. I will not deny it. You know, how does a rebalancing system could work behind the scene to make sure that, of course, we go back to costs are covered for ANSP. What about airspace which are already congested? Would this shift traffic? What would be the impact on the airline? We definitively don't have all the answers to this question. As we, the three of us said, it's a work in progress. But still, let's embrace the challenge. Let's take it, and let's work on it. Finally, I'm not so far in my conclusion from where Valerie was. But I would come from a different angle. I would say, let's take it and let's make it work and let's make it better. And maybe while we take the topic and we work on it, we're going to find more dynamic solution, because I agree today our remuneration system is not very dynamic. It's based a lot on constraints. And working on the common unit rate, we could even maybe work on a more dynamic common unit rate. We often talk about the city pair rate, for example, which would be something that we could explore. Having a rate on some destination which is cheaper or more expensive depending on the level of traffic. So I think there are a lot of options in this common unit rate. And I think that at Skyguide we would be ready to work on it and look into it to make it work and to maybe make it better than just a common unit rate. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Okay, so there's a lot of ground we've covered there. The main messages I heard was that there are a lot of different challenges. We need to approach this in a more dynamic way. I think everybody agrees, interestingly, sustainability is the key challenge, and it's about how we can reward those behaviors. But before I get into that, first of all, can I go back to Elena just to talk a little bit about the suspicion, shall we say, that the behavior of airlines is driven by the pricing model. Now, we all know that with flight management systems there, that they're much more sophisticated. So when you're calculating route, all of those factors get weighed in. I think the study seems to indicate that some of the stuff we have seen might be marginal, but talk to me a little bit about the relationship between the cost of fuel and ATM charges and how that's factored in, and the relative weighting from information from your members.
I cannot reveal information from my members. I cannot point to anything else nor get into the details. But I am not sure I understand completely your question. But I mean, fuel costs represent around 30% of our total cost basis, which is considerably much more than whatever the unit rates can represent, which is probably in the surroundings of the 5-6%. If from that part, which is of the total charges that we have to pay in all the airspaces, you go for how much the expensive airspaces represent, it's not that much. I don't have the exact and concrete number. But yeah, in summary, the impact in an airline on their decisions about flying one airspace with respect to another, or to fly some route with respect to another, is usually driven. I mean, the decision is usually driven by a cost function that takes into account several parameters. It is a multi-factor decision. It is fuel that, as I said, and especially with the current fuel prices, believe me, this is the main driver. It is not only fuel. I mean, we are already paying taxation for the emissions through the emission trading scheme, which means that the more fuel we consume, the more taxes we also have to pay for that. We have also other sort of compensation mechanism to try to be carbon neutral, because we are already trying to do that. So fuel is actually the main driver, but there are others. I mean, obviously, if eventually the cost function get minimized by trying to avoid an airspace, that could be a factor in the decision. But currently fuel has much more weight. Other factors that can be put into the equation, sometimes we prioritize time, because sometimes we have to catch up with delays that have taken place in the previous rotations of our flights. And in the end, we have to provide a service to our customers, who are the passengers, who are expecting to get in time to the destination airport many times to be able to connect with another flight. And this also can cause a cost to us, because if we are not able to comply with our commitment with our customers, we also have to compensate the customers.
Sure. No, absolutely.
So this is also a cost. I mean, when minimizing a cost function, we are not talking about the charges that we pay for the use of a certain airspace. We are talking about a very much complex cost calculation.
So would IATA support a model of incentivization? I think the other two speakers have touched on it. They acknowledge the limitation of the common unit rate, but given that you've capacity constraints, you need to make if it's a hub and spoke model, you need to get your people there on time. Do you think that we should be looking at a different kind of model and taking into account what we discussed about sustainability? Do you think we should be going a different route, or would you like to retain the status quo?
I think we should explore other alternatives, as I have said before, because I think this proposal, this system, can have very unintended effects, and it could have very negative effects in many stakeholders. Okay. So, as I have said before, the effects will not be neutral. Okay. And I think any regulatory initiative should be very careful with that, because we could be affecting regional airlines or regional operators providing connectivity in remote areas in Scandinavia or islands in the Mediterranean, just for trying to solve a problem in Central Europe, which has nothing to do with them. Okay. So we will be affecting some stakeholders very negatively for the sake or the benefit of some other stakeholders. Okay. And the affected negatively will not be able to have any benefit. So.
Okay, understood. And that ties in very much with certainly what we've seen, particularly since the Ukrainian war, is the reduction in capacity in the system is actually the major limitation, which we see as well. And that's, so there are many more factors which are starting to play into that. If I go to you, Valerie, then going back to sustainability and the role of the ANSPs, obviously that's a very challenging piece for you. How do you think we would best be engaging with the airlines as customers in order to try, and I mean this in a general sense from the ANSP point of view, to do this? Obviously, SES2 Plus is still for progressing or whatever, but it hasn't been complete, shall we say? So where do you see that as being a piece from your point of view?
Yes, I think there are a number of levers that we have in charge in order to contribute to those 10% of contribution in CO2 reduction, at least. I think one of the pieces of the puzzle will be and will be the network manager. I think it is, and it does make sense to put some focus on network efficiency, with, of course, a healthy balance of efficiency levers and accountability that has to be in a healthy balance. For one topic. The second, as I touched upon, free routes airspace, I think that's something that we really need to work upon between the ANSPs and vis-a-vis the users, there lies a huge impact as well. And of course, there's a number of smaller and bigger initiatives such as 4D trajectory planning, collaborative decision making. I think all those add up to a larger picture, and pricing is one element in this. And I do believe that in pricing there is some chance as well, but I'm, as I said, not sure, given the lack of evidence of a clear impact, at least when it comes to environmental focus, if a common and a single unit rate is the golden path forward.
Okay, understood. So Nicole, if I go to you then, you raised the issue of the network-centric approach, and Valerie has touched on that, and the capacity issue. How best should we bring that into the model? I mean, if we have limited capacity in the system, then it implies some kind of brokerage system whereby capacity is managed. But that doesn't really address the sustainability piece. And you might talk to me as well just about the behaviours which you raised in relation to assets versus services. How does that, what kind of distortion, shall we say, does that cause? Does it actually build more costs into the system?
Well, yeah, of course, the remuneration system has a direct impact on, the way ANSP spend money today, and what it incentivizes, and how we move forward. So today, as long as we have a WACC and we are paid according to a weighted average cost of capital, each ANSP has interest to build more assets to get more remuneration. While we know that, and now I'm looking at our customer airlines, if we want to be efficient and if we want to decrease our costs and to flexibilize our costs in the future to be able to better meet the demands, we have to buy more services. And as long as we stay with a remuneration scheme which is based on assets, this does not help. But this is more a financial topic than an environmental topic. When it comes to environment, the current scheme does not, also push for network centricity. And we know that if we work more as a network, if we do not only optimize our airspace or our airspace with the border, but if we really optimize European airspace as a network, we will be also able to provide our customer with more capacity and with more efficient and environmental friendly routes. And this is also very important, I think, now that we have FRA coming into the game, that we are more and more network centric, so that we can give more opportunities to our customer. And our current remuneration scheme does not really take this into account. And of course, there are INSP with higher unit rates than some higher than the others. Switzerland, as known, is one of the most expensive unit rate in Europe. This is no secret. And one of the elements is also because, the relationship between the costs that we have and the size of our airspace is completely disconnected. And maybe, today we are remunerated according to kilometers and weight, which is also linked to the size of our airspace. But the contribution we bring to the network, we hope, with creating a very low level of delay, being very efficient for our customer, brings much more value to the network. And can bring more value also to the environment than just the size of our airspace. So today, this is a problem of the remuneration scheme, which push ANSP to be very national and local and not to be network centric anymore. So that's why I say status quo is not an option. And we say, a common rate would be more complex, that was said, because it creates an additional layer. Yeah, it's true. It's more complex for the network manager, because you have to do the rebalancing. But for the airlines, it would be easier, because then you don't have to put this in your flight plan system. It's one input that can be removed, because then it's not an arbitration element anymore. You can concentrate on fuel, you can concentrate on being on time. You don't have to take into account, should I fly over Austria or over Switzerland or over Belgium, because there are different rates, and it would make your life, I think, easier. So I see it as an opportunity, a lot of challenge. Again, I will not deny it. How will it work practically? But an opportunity.
Yeah, and people have been picking up on this just on the chat. I just see it on the question and answer piece. If free route airspace leads to a more network-centric approach, but people's point is that that actually is more of an argument for a common rate, more because you're now spreading the cost of the network element, to go back to your point. But I think what you're saying is that it's more complex than that, and that there are other factors which need to be taken into account. Okay.
Yes, sure. Yeah.
So, Elena, to go back to the point which you raised about the cost transparency piece with ANSPs, I think your argument is that in order to promote competition, I don't know if you use the exact words, but certainly to have more cost transparency with ANSPs and to, shall we say, incentivize or reward the more, inverted commas, competitive ones, is that a key element from IATA's point of view, that you maintain that transparency to do that? And you might also talk a little bit about what you would like to see from SES2, or what other levers might be used as part of that.
Before, when I talked about complexity of the system, I was not referring to the fact that common unit rate would simplify or not our decisions because the unit rate is the same. I mean, that could be true, but when I talk about the complexity, I am talking about the complexity of the repartition rules, because we are talking here about respecting the revenue neutrality of the NSPs and the different states, which, as you, Philip, has said at the beginning, they are unequal and they range quite importantly across Europe. So I do believe that these repartition rules will be very difficult to establish. And when I talked about potential reduced transparency, it is because the current system provides us with a lot of information about the costs and how they evolve for the different states, not only the NSPs. I don't consider my colleagues today the enemy in any sort of way. But you know, there is a lot of information to know and to understand in what kind of things the NSPs are investing, or what are the drivers behind the evolution of their staff cost, or their support cost, or the services they buy when they have outsourced services, and this kind of thing. When you go to the average the system, we don't know how this could be working, whether we still could have access to this detailed information, or it would work differently, and if we could have access to this information, and how it will work, because quite probably we will need a much stronger regulation, economic regulation, to control all the contributions to this system. And we truly believe that the tendency in some countries will be to increase costs, because locally the public employees will still be working for a public company, a state company in the different states. So unless all the system changes very significantly, we see a potential difficulty there in the introduction of a system that implies a repartition and redistribution of the money collected. Because the money collected in some countries that are currently cheaper will not be retained by those countries. That could be an expectation for the country, because it is country collected for the use of their services and their airspaces. But it will be given to another state, which we believe it is going to be a very controversial issue. And we are not sure about what this could be working. If I might say something, Philippe, I mean, we are talking in turns, and I have not had the opportunity to thank my colleagues for their approach to this topic, because I think this is going to be one of the key issues to truly solve any problem. I mean, work in collaboration. As I have just said, I think we have to work together for the sake of the environment in particular. As I have said at the beginning, I think this problem of the common unit rate is more economical than environmental. But we as airlines, and myself as an airline representative and representing an airlines association, I think we are more than happy to work in collaboration to ANSPs. We truly appreciate the efforts some ANSPs have been doing, and we agree with our colleagues, and especially to Valerie, who has mentioned the free route. I think this is one of the key elements in environmental benefits. We are very happy that it is finally starting giving benefits, and I truly believe that collaboration is the key element here.
I'm glad you raised that, because it's actually one of the things that struck me very strongly about this whole dialogue is that there is actually a consensus around the collaboration and the piece to do that. And I think also that sustainability is a major challenge for the industry as a whole, and all of the partners have to play a part in order to do that. Valerie, if I could come to you about one of the points that Elena has raised, in that if we went down the road of a common unit rate, what would the impact, and I'm looking at some of the questions here from some of the social partners. I have one here from ATC EUC about what happens about how the negotiation piece in terms of social rights, particularly if certain ANSPs who have a cheaper rate or cheaper terms and conditions are providing services elsewhere. Do you think that would become an issue in the system if we didn't address it through this?
Good question. If I understand you correctly, I mean, still we would hopefully and most probably exchange cost basis and national unit rates. So we would still have transparency on those. Mm-hmm. And we could still benchmark us and challenge ourselves and be challenged by EU institutions, of course, by national institutions, of course, etc. At the same time, as Ellen said, and I think this would be could lead to a rational consequence that, of course, those states that have lower prices feel pressure, let's put it this way, from their systems, from certain parties, that they orient themselves towards the common unit rate that might be higher. And the question is, will the same happen in those countries where unit prices are higher than the common unit rate? And probably one has to doubt that this will be the case for several good reasons that are out there. Otherwise, those countries that are more expensive would already do something to lower costs. So I can definitely relate to this concern. I do share this concern, and I think this is one of the things that we need to address very carefully in order to find acceptance for this whole concept. Since this concept produces winners and losers, we carefully need to address what implications different mechanisms will have to those stakeholders involved.
Okay, understood. So Nicole, as the finance person in the room, Elena raised the issue in relation to certain states potentially having a discomfort about accepting a drop in cash flow and then having to go through a readjustment piece or wait for money to come to third parties. From a pure technical point of view, do you see that as being an issue, or?
Well, it depends how it is implemented, of course. So this is something that has been to looked at, and so that we find the right solution. It's true that if we take SkyGuide, and if we go with the common unit rate, which would be lower than the current SkyGuide unit rate, it would mean that we would get less cash and we would have to wait for the rebalancing system to get cash back. So, but that's something we have to work with, I think, with the network manager to see practically how this could be implemented. We could even imagine that ANSP would still invoice to the network manager with their country unit rate, and then the network manager could make the average and then invoice the average to the airline. So it depends how we make it happen technically and practically. But I think there are ways we can find together. There are 2 points I would like to maybe bring with this question. The first one is that I don't think that this would have a negative impact on cost efficiency. Today, cost efficiency is managed with a performance plan and with the European regulation. And the European Commission with PRC and PRB are here to put pressure on ANSP to make sure that we meet the efficiency targets set by the European Commission. We saw the challenge it was with the FABEC performance plan during RP3, where we had to go through different rounds of discussion before the performance plan was accepted. So I think that airline, Elena said maybe we need a stronger regulator, European regulator, maybe, but then this is not related to having or not having a common rate. You know, it's related to how do we make sure that as ANSP we bring as much efficiency as we can to airlines, and I think that airlines have to trust maybe, you know, the European Commission and the PRB and the PRC, that they put the necessary pressure on ANSP to bring their costs down, and we can still have the transparency on our cost, you know, and still having a common rate. So I don't see an opposition in having a common rate and having transparency on cost, and still having pressure to be more efficient from a cost perspective. And I think also maybe one point I would like to bring is that I believe strongly on an incentivizing system and not constraining system. So I think that you know, human brain is really good at working around constraints and working around punishment. If we have some punishing system, we have some today in the regulation. So ANSP are punished when they create delay, for example, today in the European regulation. But there is no incentive again to, you know, be network centric. So I believe very much in a system, remuneration system, which would be based more on incentivation and less on constraint and punishment.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm just conscious of the clock here, so I do want to allow each of you just to give a brief summary of your impressions and the points raised here. For me personally, I think it's been very interested in the sense that there is actually quite a large degree of consensus around some of the issues and some more work which needs to be done on others. But Elena, I'll give you the floor just to give me a short summary.
Well, thank you to all my counterparts for their opinions. I might agree or disagree with some of their statements, but I think this has been a good discussion. My conclusion will be, I mean, could we please explore, because this is maybe a system with winners and losers. Could we please explore the current mechanism that we have to have similar results without getting into this discussion going any further about the common unit rate? I mean, we have, as I have said before, current elements available, and we could have similar effects as the effects, the positive effects that we could be gaining with the common unit rate. So to me, there is no need to introduce additional measures or additional mechanisms when we have already the tools in our hands to potentially find alternative solutions or equally good solutions or even more efficient solutions for the problem at hand. So,
okay, thank you, Elena. Valerie, your final thoughts after that discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Philip. I would actually like to thank you and Eurocontrol to open the floor to this topic, because I think we should really value every single bit that might help us. And I think in this case, there are some arguments in it. And I think at the same time, there is some more work to do in terms of persuading and finding evidence on what effects and impacts might there be. I do think that we should be very sensitive when it comes to changing mechanisms. And actually, this is some sort of a paradigm shift. So we should better not make mistakes and really be very careful in making those plans. And at the same time, if we find that this particular common unit rate might not have the desirable impact, then let go from the idea and focus our efforts and energies on other concepts that might be more promising. And this has to be done collaboratively as we are partners, and we need to tackle those problems together, because there is no other solution to the environmental challenge.
Thanks, Valerie. Nicole?
Yes, so my last word would be, tackling environmental issue is a today topic. It's not a tomorrow topic. So we have to work on it now. We have a proposal on the table. This is a common unit rate. Is a common unit rate the golden path to the perfect system? I don't think so. It comes with challenges, but I think there is something in it. And I think we should start from this proposal, which is on the table, which I think is a piece also to the single European sky that we have been trying to implement for a while. This would be one piece of the puzzle. So I would start from this proposal and see what it means, see what are the impacts, work on it. We know that today there are different data that are not always consistent. So I think we need more information, and we need to work on the practicality of implementing it, what it would mean. We all know also that the transformation and the paradigm shift come with, maybe winner and loser. I mean, a transformation means something is different. So of course, this will have impact. Let's look at the impact. And I'm convinced that anyway, we have to change the remuneration scheme. Again, we have a proposal on the table. Let's take it, let's size it, and work on it to maybe with it, build on it and come with something which is even more dynamic and even better for our environment, because that's what we need to do together again. And collaboration here is key between the different stakeholders. So the network manager, definitively airlines and the ANSP, that together we can find a better solution for environment. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Okay. So just to wrap it up, I think that was a very interesting piece. I think Nicole indicated there that what's currently on the table is the common unit rate. I think everybody agreed from different angles that it really wasn't a panacea for the problem, given the underlying complexity and changes. I think everybody agrees, however, that sustainability is the single biggest challenge. And really now that the only way forward really is for collaboration between ANSPs and airlines in particular, who are at the sharp end of this particular problem, to do that. As network manager here in Eurocontrol, obviously we're here to help as well, but we would only be part of the solution in terms of doing that. What the mechanics involved would be, we don't know. I did take the point about incentivization to try and change behaviors, and that's something that's not really in the system. But I also recognize that from the airlines' point of view, they feel that all of the problems or the sharp end is really at their door. But I think what I found very interesting, gratifying, was the sense that from an ANSP and an airline point of view, working together really is the way to go about it. So that was very interesting. So that was a very interesting discussion. So it really behoves me now to, I suppose the point we have to carry on about this is how we go about that, and maybe that's something we can debate in the near future. It only remains for me now, first of all, to thank the panelists for a really interesting discussion. It was really good, and thank you very much for your preparation and clarity of thought in terms of this issue. So just to say thanks to everybody. And we will hopefully return to this topic soon with perhaps some developments in the future. It only remains me now just to remind people to stay tuned for the next webinar, which we have on ATCO mobility, another topical issue on the 1st of March. And I wish you a very good day. And again, thank you to all the panelists, and talk to you all soon. Don't forget, tune in to the EUROCONTROL Stakeholder Forum on the 1st of March, and we hope to bring you more topical issues on this. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye. Good afternoon, everyone.